Welcome back. I'm Joe.
Hey everyone, Sunny here. Settle in, folks. You know how we do grab your favorite beverage? We're definitely diving headfirst into some pretty interesting stuff today.
That's right. We're going to be unpacking, well, a narrative that keeps popping up. China's claims, their assertions of ownership over a whole bunch of places. It's got history, it's got modern politics, the works.
Yeah, it really feels like, I don't know, every few weeks you see a headline, right? China says this place or that place historically belongs to them. The one that really jumped out at me recently was Okinawa.
Ah, yes, Okinawa.
But, I mean, the claim was basically that it used to be a tributary state, so that makes it Chinese. That didn't go over too well with the Ryukyu royal family descendants. Kind of sounds like saying my bank owns my car because I send them a payment.
Hey, not a bad analogy, actually. Sho Hakuhaku, who's the 22nd generation descendant of that royal line, the Ryukyu kingdom rulers, he came out pretty strong. This was May 2025. And he basically said, look, yes, Ryukyu paid tribute to the Ming and Qing dynasties in China. But, and this is the key part, they were their own kingdom. Distinct culture, identity, ruled themselves.
Right. Paying tribute isn't like signing over the deed, is it?
Exactly. It was a relationship, sure, but it didn't mean they were part of China.
So Japan's kind of looking over its shoulder now, worried about like a war of words over Okinawa's sovereignty.
Yeah, there's definitely concern about a potential discourse war, as they put it. But you're right, Okinawa. It's really just the tip of the iceberg here. China has quite a few of these claims going.
Okay, so where else are they planting these historical flags?
Well, the big one, probably the most famous, is the South China Sea, that whole 9-dash line thing.
Oh, yeah, the U-shaped line on the map. Okay, so lay it on us. What's the core of their argument there?
Essentially, China claims almost the entire South China Sea. We're talking islands like the Spratlys, the Paracels, Scarborough Shoal, huge area.
And the reason is?
History. They point to records, usage, naval expeditions going back centuries, saying they were there first, basically.
But, correct me if I'm wrong, there are quite a few other countries right there on the coast. Vietnam, Philippines.
Oh, absolutely. You've got the Philippines, Vietnam, Malaysia, Brunei, even Indonesia has overlapping claims based on UNCLOS, the law of the sea.
And didn't, like, an international court weigh in on this?
It did. Back in 2016, the Permanent Court of Arbitration in The Hague, they ruled pretty decisively against the legal basis of China's 9-dash line claim. Big ruling.
But China's reaction was basically, thanks, but no thanks.
Pretty much. They refused to participate in the proceedings and rejected the ruling outright. Just ignored it.
Wow. Okay. Then, of course, there's Taiwan. That's like a whole other level of complexity, isn't it? Feels like everyone's kind of holding their breath on that one.
Definitely a separate and incredibly sensitive issue. Beijing's stance, ever since 1949, is that Taiwan is a province, a breakaway province, eventually set for reunification.
Out of force, if needed, right? That's often part of the message.
That's often stated, yes. Force hasn't been ruled out.
But, I mean, you look at Taiwan today. They've got their own government, democratically elected, their own military. They deal with other countries. It doesn't look like a province.
Objectively, yes. Taiwan functions as a self-governing democracy with all the trappings of a state. But because of Beijing's objections, it lacks broad, formal international recognition. Like it's not in the UN.
Right. Okay, moving west, inland, the border with India, Arunachal Pradesh. China calls it something else, though.
South Tibet. Xiangnan. In Chinese. That's another really long-standing dispute.
So China says it's Tibet, India runs it.
India has administered it for decades, yes. China maintains it's historically part of Tibet. It's a very sensitive border area.
And they actually fought a war over this region, didn't they? Way back.
They did. The Sino-Indian War in 1962 was largely focused on this and other border areas. And tensions, well, they still flare up. China consistently includes Arunachal Pradesh on its official maps as Chinese territory.
Okay, and then there are those islands. East China Sea, Diaoyu, Senkaku, depending on who you asked.
That's the one. Diaoyu to China, Senkaku to Japan. Uninhabited rocks, essentially, but a huge point of friction.
Coast Guards are always buzzing around there, seems like.
Constantly. China claims them based on Ming Dynasty records, discovery, usage. Japan currently administers them and says they were terra nullius, nobody's land, when they claimed them in the late 19th century. Lots of close calls between patrol vessels out there.
And it's not just the big neighbors, is it? China's had border stuff with smaller countries, too.
Correct. There have been ongoing, though perhaps less globally reported, border issues with Bhutan, Nepal, even Tajikistan, although parts of the Tajikistan border were formally resolved through treaties fairly recently. but disputes remain elsewhere.
Even with Russia, I thought they were supposed to be close allies these days.
Well, officially the border was settled in the 1990s. But recently, you've seen some Chinese commentators, nationalist bloggers, even some materials referring to places like Vladivostok.
Vladivostok, in Russia.
Yeah, using its old Chinese name Haishanwei, and framing it as territory unfairly ceded to Russia during the Qing dynasty's weaker periods. It hasn't gone unnoticed in Russia, let's just say.
Okay, wow. So we've got Okinawa, South China Sea, Taiwan, India, Japan, smaller neighbors, even hints about Russia, rewriting history a bit to fit today's ambitions. But surely this approach has downsides. You can't just go around saying, that's mine, without making enemies, can you?
Absolutely. Major downsides. For one, many of these claims, especially in the maritime domain, clash pretty directly with established international law, like UNCLOS.
The law of the sea, yeah.
Then there's the obvious risk. It increases regional tension dramatically, raises the possibility of miscalculation, even conflict. And perhaps most importantly, long-term, it really damages relationships with neighbors.
Pushes them together, maybe? Like the Quad?
Precisely. It can foster counter-alliances, pushing countries like Japan, Australia, India, and the U.S. closer together, specifically to balance against China. So it can be counterproductive.
You know, this whole it's mine thing, it reminds me. You ever see Finding Nemo?
Yeah, the seagulls.
Yeah, the seagulls just flying around squawking, mine, 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 at everything. It's funny, but I read something that actually drew a parallel between that behavior and this concept called the giant baby phenomenon.
Ah, yes, mine. Mine. It's actually, well, it's a surprisingly relevant analogy in some way.
Right. Like they just see something and instantly, possessively, it's mine. And apparently that's totally normal for toddlers, right? Like 1.5 to 3 years old.
That's right. Developmental psychologists, Piaget, for instance, called it the pre-operational stage. A key feature is egocentrism. Little kids literally struggle to understand that other people have different thoughts, feelings, needs, perspectives. Their world is the world.
So sharing is not high on the agenda yet. It's all about me and mine. Okay, so connect this to the giant baby idea in China. What does it mean?
So the term giant baby, it was really popularized by a Chinese psychologist, Wu Zhihong. It describes adults who, well, emotionally and psychologically haven't fully matured beyond that infantile or toddler stage.
So grown-ups acting like toddlers.
In certain ways, yes. Characteristics include things like being overly dependent, having big emotional reactions or tantrums when they don't get their way, really low frustration tolerance, and this specific type of egocentrism that's often tied to a group identity.
Wait, collectivist-driven egocentrism, how does that work? Sounds like opposites.
It does, but think of it this way. The individual sense of self, their feelings of entitlement, are all wrapped up in the group, the family, the nation, whatever. So an insult to the group feels like a deep personal insult. A challenge to the group's status quo triggers a very personal, very emotional, defensive reaction. It's my group, therefore mine.
Huh. Okay, so how does this giant baby idea, this collective egocentrism, potentially feed into China's territorial claims? What factors in China might contribute to this?
There are likely multiple layers. You've got historical factors, the deep cultural emphasis on collectivism, the whole century of humiliation, narrative fueling intense nationalism, maybe an education system that traditionally prioritized obedience over critical independent thinking.
Right. If you're taught loyalty and unity above all, questioning the group's claims might not come naturally. What about more recent things?
Well, some analysts point to the one-child policy, which created generations of little emperors who are the sole focus of attention. Then there's the rapid economic growth, which put a huge focus on material wealth and ownership getting mine, and the internet environment.
The Great Firewall.
Exactly. It can limit exposure to different viewpoints, making it easier for nationalist narratives to dominate and seem like the only truth.
Plus, the government itself pushes these ideas pretty hard, doesn't it? Territorial integrity, the Chinese dream.
Oh, absolutely. State propaganda constantly reinforces nationalism, emphasizes historical narratives of indivisibility, and state media amplifies these feelings. Any challenge to the official line on territory can quickly be labeled unpatriotic, even traitorous.
Okay, so can we connect the dots? Can we see specific examples of this mine or giant baby mentality and how these territorial disputes actually play out?
I think you can draw plausible links. Look at the really intense, often very emotional online fury you see whenever the South China Sea comes up. Or the huge nationalist protests, boycotts of Japanese goods during flare-ups over the Diaoyu Senkaku Islands.
Right. Very visceral reactions.
Yeah. And maybe the tendency to dismiss Okinawan voices when discussing Okinawa's history, it doesn't fit the preferred narrative, so it's ignored. You even see it in things like cultural ownership fights, remember the arguments over kimchi, or traditional clothing like hanfu.
Oh yeah, those are wild.
And the behavior of the Little Pinks, those very aggressive online nationalists. Even within China sometimes, you see examples that Wu Jihong might point to prioritizing personal or narrow group gain over broader public good, perhaps.
It's like this fundamental need to assert ownership, control the narrative, whether it's land or history or culture. Okay, so stepping back, what's the main takeaway here? What are we trying to get at with this deep dive?
Well, our goal here, like always on the show, is really just to foster clear understanding, to try and illuminate maybe illogical arguments by applying some logic and context.
See things clearly.
Exactly. So with Okinawa, for example, the evidence suggests China's recent noise is probably less about a deeply held belief in historical ownership and more about geopolitics.
Like poking the U.S.-Japan alliance, connecting it to the Senkaku dispute.
Precisely. It's likely more strategic maneuvering than a genuine sovereignty claim they expect to realize soon.
And crucially, the Ryukyu descendants themselves and people in Okinawa, they aren't buying it.
Not at all. They strongly reject it. So you see, these disputes are incredibly complex. It's history, it's politics, it's international law, all tangled together.
Yeah, definitely not simple. And probably not getting resolved anytime soon.
Likely not. It underscores the need for patient diplomacy, clear communication, and probably a lot of international coordination.
So, thinking bigger picture, this whole mine thing, whether it's seagulls or toddlers or, international relations, it really highlights how vital it is to try and step outside your own viewpoint, doesn't it?
Absolutely. To try and understand where other people or other countries are coming from, moving beyond that egocentric perspective seems pretty fundamental for, well, getting along on a crowded planet.
Yeah, it forces you to think about your own possessiveness too, right?
Yeah.
Over ideas or how you see history.
Definitely. Recognizing that tendency in ourselves and seeing it play out elsewhere, it's maybe the first step towards having more constructive conversations, more peaceful interactions.
I remember when my cousin's kid went through that phase. Seriously, you couldn't even look at his favorite truck without a full-on meltdown. It's kind of funny, but then you see echoes of it on a global scale, and the stakes are way higher than a toy truck.
Indeed. It really poses that fundamental question, doesn't it? How do you balance building a strong, coherent national identity with genuinely respecting the sovereignty, the history, and the perspectives of other nations? Where's that line?
Yeah, that's definitely something to chew on. Well, folks, that wraps up our deep dive for today. Hope we gave you some interesting things to think about.
We hope so.
If you enjoyed puzzling through this with us, please do hit that subscribe button for the deep dive. Helps us out a lot. And hey, you know the drill. Go check out our good friend Micky's YouTube channel. Always got something cool going on over there.
Definitely worth a look.
All right. Until next time, keep sipping, keep talking, and keep digging deeper.